Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hi, Karen. I'm good. Sorry, a little thing popped up. It was hardly visible saying that you joined the room. I was looking over there, but there you are. And
Yeah,
I've just started recording.
yeah, good one. And thank you so much for the magazine. That's so thoughtful of you.
Oh, it was nothing. When you said that you didn't have a copy, I was like, oh no, it's you've got to have it. And for me, it was just a thrill to see that you'd written that article. And then I tried to get another copy somewhere, and this expert, who's one of the only people I could find who sells them, said that one's really hard to get. So I thought, it should go to the real person, the person actually wrote the article, and I scanned it and took some nice photos. So your lovely inscriptions there, and if you ever want to put it up somewhere without the inscription on it, if you just want to say this is what it looked like originally, I'm really good with Photoshop. I can get rid of the inscription for you if you needed it. What I mean?
Thanks. Dave, I don't do much online, like all that is sort of from the olden days. But I have had this enormous pleasure recently. One of the safety strategies clients that we run a regular one-day refresher for. So we're in our 5th year with them. And so I work with a colleague who also does Wing Chun in our lineage. And this year we're refreshing the weapons with them and also short range power. And so I went through all the old TV segments and found clips of Jim Fung doing the weapons and also myself doing the weapons. So we show them a video of all these clips. And then also we teach them that idea of generating power at close range. So I did all these clips of Jim Fung doing the 1-inch punch, and I get so much enjoyment out of it. Like, I love Kung Fu movie making. It's one of my favorite hobbies of all time.
Yeah.
And just putting them together. And then every day we go to work with this client, I get to see them and I feel excited. I just feel like, wow, they were the glory days, and it brings it all back.
Oh yeah, it's just I'm so thrilled to have been a part of what was going on in the 90s, and you were there in the 70s, and I was in Brisbane wishing I could find a Wing Chun master, and I've always felt grateful in a funny way because I started Kung Fu in 1975. It was really just a guy who was a third dan in Taekwondo teaching us Taekwondo plus whatever he could sort of try to grasp from what Bruce Lee was doing in the movies and reading Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And I realized if I'd started with other Wing Chun teachers, I could have spent, 25, 30 years doing it the way people do it, which is the way I wouldn't have wanted to do it. I was lucky to find the real thing eventually.
Well, yeah, we have to be grateful for what we've got. But let's jump in and get started with any of the things that you want to ask.
Yeah,
because I'm going to try and finish up by 6 if we can.
Absolutely. Well, I took notes of what we were talking about last time when I stuffed up and didn't record, and I've just checked. It's definitely says it's recording.
Yes.
Yes, it's got pause, stop recording, which means it is recording. So I'm just moving you so I can look at you and the camera. Firstly, just introducing you to my followers on YouTube who might know you. This is wonderful Wing Chun practitioner Karen Armstrong, who started in 1977. Is that right? Yep. Karen started with Sifu Jim Fung, who was my Sifu. I started in 1997, 20 years later. And these two books have always been little Bibles to me. There's so much wonderful information in there. And I know that it says Sifu Jim Fung and Karen Armstrong. I got a feeling you being a writer probably did a heck of a lot of the writing. And, I sort of realized that you're a very creative person looking at your older videos and whatever, and especially what you did getting that article published. I'll put it in this video I'll just put it up on the screen showing people the article, which I found accidentally when I bought some other Kung Fu magazines in Melbourne. And yeah, it was almost meant to be, because this guy he'd had your magazine and some others in a box since 1970, whatever. And this is like 2001. I said, "You got any Kung Fu magazines?" "Oh, yeah." He brings them out. They're brand new. And I'm going, what are these, like reproductions? He goes, "No, they've been in a box out there since the 70s. So it was sort of meant to be that I found it. And yeah, those books are a little bit underappreciated these days. People in international Wing Chun still read them, but it's sort of a bit forgotten. So I have talked a little bit in my channel about these books, but I'm going to do more. But here we have Karen Armstrong, the actual writer of the books. I guess I wanted to start off just asking you about your early days from 77, how you joined the school in Adelaide, and anything you want to tell me about. You told me a lot, and I look forward to hearing again about what got you interested and how you were a martial artist previously, and then you discovered Wing Chun. So
Yeah, when I was a teenager, I came across Taekwondo, and I guess as a child growing up, I was pretty active. I loved sport and gymnastics and physical pursuits. And one evening, when I was a teenager, I was walking through the grounds of Melbourne University with a friend and a girlfriend, and these guys approached us, and they were possibly just friendly, I don't know, but she suddenly put on this fighting stance and yelled out "Kiai" really loudly and jumped into action. And there was this group of about 3 or 4 of them, and somehow they just melted and faded into the background. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Like, she just jumped into this Taekwondo fighting stance with a loud noise, and they've suddenly disappeared. And it was just the sheer power of what she'd done. I thought, I want that. And the poor guys, they were probably coming up to ask what time it was or something like that. And anyway, so I took up Taekwondo and I loved it. And I trained at a sub-branch, and I thought, no, I want the real thing. I want to go to the city headquarters. And so I took it very seriously. I trained every day. I loved it. And I learned to shout and fly, jump through the air and that sort of stuff. And so I did that all up for probably about 3.5 years. And I think I was going to go for my brown belt. And like everybody, I wanted to be a black belt. And I came across I was asked to be in a demonstration of women doing martial arts. And the other art being demonstrated was Wing Chun. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is so boring. You know, what's this sort of really impressive movements that they're doing? I had no idea. I just looked at it and thought it was really boring. But I heard it was founded by a woman, so I felt a little bit obligated. I thought, oh, you know, I'm a woman that's founded by a woman. My first thought was it's probably one of those silly, useless things where they have those thin, kind of wafer-thin swords that don't do anything. Like, honestly, it was a very sexist impression that I had of what I thought it would be. And so I felt obliged. I thought, look, you want to become a black belt, you love Taekwondo, you're never going to give it up. You go to this Wing Chun thing once a week out of obligation. So I went to my first lesson and I was just blown away. I thought, wow, low heel kick to the kneecap. Like, that's fantastic. Centerline punching, counter attack. The principles we were taught, you know, simplicity, directness, economy of movement, minimum use of brute strength, practicality. I was blown away after that first lesson.
Still stuck in here.
Yeah. Well, and so then I thought, what am I going to do? I think I went back for one more Taekwondo lesson. I just couldn't do it anymore. It just didn't make sense. And so after that, I was at the Wing Chun Academy 5 nights a week, flat out training, and I just loved it.
Yeah. Go getter, aren't you? You see something and you want it, and you go, right, I'm going to make that mine.
like I've become a Christian, Dave. I feel this is God's destiny for me. That was God's path. And even back then in my pre-Christian days, I always knew that something, like how could I end up doing something so incredibly fantastic? And I always thought it was destiny or something like that, that I'd been led along this path. And because I loved it so much and I was there all the time, I was the first person to take on a professional teaching role at the Wing Chun Academy. I took on a part-time instructor role because the school grew, and being founded by a woman, have a woman doing publicity. So the media were always interested in a martial art founded by a woman because it's kind of unusual. And so it was better to have a woman talking about that and demonstrating that. So gradually that became me. I would do the TV interviews, radio and newspaper interviews. And the school grew and grew. When I joined it, it was a very well-run school, very good teaching system, very good library, including Real Kung Fu magazine. And it had about 100 members, and it gradually grew to have over 1,000 members. It really grew, it was really growing in Adelaide. And so Jim Fung made a decision to take on create a professional instructor role. And I guess I was there. And I'd also had studied fitness training. And I felt like, okay, that's where that whole slogan, fitness with a purpose, came from. People want to learn self-defense. They want to learn to get fit at the same time. So we actually instituted like a bit of a proper warm-up, stretching, and a bit of aerobic training, and, you know, made it a little bit more structured. And prior to that, anyone who became a first level, which was our equivalent of black belt, automatically became an instructor. But after doing that fitness instructor training, I realised you should actually train instructors. You don't just get a certain grading and then suddenly you're teaching. And so I set up an instructor training program in the Adelaide school, just to make sure that people who were teaching knew what they were doing. And so, yeah, gradually the school just grew and grew, and eventually my position became full-time. We opened a branch in Sydney we kept trying to open branches in Sydney, but the first full-time centre was set up there in 1984 in Elizabeth Street. And then we moved to a bigger premises in 1987 in Sussex Street, where the school's premises is still there now. And basically the school just kept growing. And we started off with one city centre, but soon we had suburban branches. I think at one stage then we had Darwin as well. So we had the three kind of states and something like 40 suburban branches. Like it was, I used to look at the whole martial art industry in Australia, and I reckoned there were big players in the martial arts scene, like Re Taekwondo were very big, and Zendo Kai Karate was big, and there were some, you know, big organisations. And I figured we were probably about the fourth biggest. So, you know, we were right up there in terms of membership and reach.
Yeah. Oh, a friend of mine in the early 2000s set up Surfers Paradise. Grant Mathers went up there, and there was a couple of other guys involved, and that was really successful quite a while. I loved being part of that school, but yes, do you recognise the shirt I'm wearing?
Is that one of Sigung or Susanna Ho's?
Yeah, this is that original one that Susanna had. I joined in 1999, so I wore this in your honour and in
thank you.
Susanna's honour, because I loved being part of that school. And the only thing that broke my heart about leaving Sydney was leaving Susanna's school, because I was just really...
Well, she doesn't teach publicly really anymore, so, you know, there's not much available. But yeah, I had a tremendous experience with her. So all those years that I was doing Wing Chun and promoting Wing Chun and teaching Wing Chun and training instructors, people would often ask me, and studying, like I went to write the Red Book, I went to China to start to research the history of Wing Chun. And, so people would always ask me, look, it was founded by a woman, you know, why isn't there a woman master? And, you know, do you hope to be that? And I would always, perhaps I had a good sense of reality about my own ability. And I'd say, well, look, not necessarily for myself personally, but it is my wish and, my sincere hope that a woman will become a master of Wing Chun. And I feel that is absolutely realised through Susanna Ho. Like, she is, in my opinion, next to Sigung, she is the best Wing Chun practitioner that I've ever seen. Chu Shong Tin, Susanna Ho, that's the order it goes in for me. And so I remember when she joined the Wing Chun Academy ages ago, like she was a overseas student here in Sydney, and she got mugged in the street, or she got robbed in the street in Bondi. And she's just a slim young Chinese girl, possibly looking quite vulnerable. And she thought, well, look, I'd better learn how to defend myself. And so she looked up the Yellow Pages, which was the go-to place then. And there was women's self-defense and there was Wing Chun. And she wasn't sure which one to do. And she thought, look, I'm Chinese, I better do Wing Chun. And I mean, thank God for our sake that she chose Wing Chun. And so she joined the academy. And as you know, our teaching program was very different to, say, like the mind power that we would all aspire to learn. Ours was more like a bit of street self-defense and that kind of thing. So she got up to first level and then she moved back to Hong Kong, and she was so interested in Wing Chun that she went to Sigung School and studied full-time, like really training, full-time, and learned this mysterious mind power, like true Wing Chun, fully not relying on brute strength, and then came back to Australia and started teaching. So I feel incredibly honoured to be part of her journey in Wing Chun. And at that time that she came back, I had left the Wing Chun Academy and I was running my own business, Safety Strategies. I was a mother by now. And I ran a small branch in Cremorne, the Cremorne Wing Chun Club, 2 nights a week. It was a lovely little experience. And look, I'd heard about this thing called mind power actually back in 1990. Jim Fung returned from Hong Kong and he'd been training with Sigung, and he said, look, there's this thing called mind power. And I mean, my view of it is that Sigung had known about it. Like, what Sigung said is that Yip Man told him about it. And this is passed on by oral hearsay.
Yeah.
I heard it from Sifu Jim, who said that Sigung told him that Yip Man told him that there was this thing called mind power. And so we know that Yip Man learned from Chan Ma Sen, who was a big, strong guy. And if you're a big, strong guy, of course you're going to use a bit of brute strength. It's really hard even for a smaller person to not use brute strength. And then when he went to Hong Kong, he learnt from Leung Bik. And Leung Bik, Leung Jan's son, we all know Leung Jan was held up as like a pillar of Wing Chun, of exceptional ability. So Leung Bik apparently had this mind power. And Yip Man said to Chu Shong Tin, our Sigung, there's this thing called mind power. He said, I don't have it myself, but I want you to know about it. I want you to know that it exists. And so Sigung, that's why we always hear that he trained differently. He trained for longer. He was called the King of Silam Tao. The stories I heard about him, I mean, mainly from Jim Fung, who was close to him and trained with him regularly, was that, so he was the third, what they call closed door master, to join Yip Man's school. Leung Seung, Lok Yu, Choi Shun Tin, Wong Seung Leung came considerably later. So Chu Shong Tin was, people are sparring and fighting and trying out their Wing Chun, and he's just trying to do this thing that he's heard about, this mind power thing, like trying to not fight back and to do it correctly. And the story went something like this. In the beginning, I got hit all the time, but then gradually I found that I wasn't getting hit. And the people I was training with were asking me, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's so powerful. So even from an early stage, I believe he was already developing, he was going down this path of, really doing Wing Chun correctly in its true form. And I would say, you know, from my own experience of training with him, because I first went to Hong Kong in 1977, 79, 84, 90. Oh, I think I went 5 times altogether. I would say that, and he started coming to Australia. We brought him out to Australia from 1986, 87 onwards for regular seminars. I mean, he must have been horrified when he saw all this, you know, side kicking, all this kicking and all this kind of westernized kung fu. But he's such a lovely, accepting guy. You know, he realized that maybe that's what the Western market wants.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you know, in Wing Chun, you wouldn't learn kicking until you're at Chum Kyu stage, until you can stand properly. But yeah, I would say that his teaching, his own knowledge and his own teaching really evolved over that time that I had contact with him, and increasingly more and more towards this mind power.
Yeah. So with Susanna, you trained with Susanna a lot longer than me. What did she say about mind power or mind force?
Well, a lot. And again, her own knowledge was evolving over those years that I went and trained under her. So I had that fantastically humbling and wonderful experience of the student becomes the teacher, like someone that was my student, you know, became far surpassed me in knowledge and ability. And so when I was running that Cremorne Wing Chun club, I'd heard that she was coming back to Australia. So I invited her to come and visit the club and just, you know, like a guest instructor. And I could see that she was just, her effortless power was incredible. So this is around 1995, 96. And so when I heard that she was teaching, like she didn't want to teach, but Sigung said to her, to improve your own ability, you need to teach. So she only did it because Sigung instructed her to do it. It wasn't her intention at all. And so when I heard that she'd opened up her school, I used to run my club 2 nights a week. I said to all the students there, I said, you know, go to her, like at least once a week. You can still come here, but at least go there, because if you're really interested in genuine Wing Chun, that's where you're going to learn it. And then I realised that I wanted to go myself. So I started going and getting someone else to do the teaching 1 night a week for me. And then after a couple of years, I closed the Wing Chun club because I realised that I would rather go and learn under her.
Yeah.
And that's where my interest lay. And I had a very short-sighted idea. Like, even although I knew that the Wing Chun that I'd learned up until then was kind of physical and not really with this mind power, and this whole thing of linking, structure, Taigong, all that kind of thing was, you know, new to me. But I had this sort of private idea, like I'm going to go and train under her for a couple of years and then I'm going to be really good and, you know, basically kick ass. But boy, was I wrong. I was completely wrong about that. It's not something that you can, well, certainly it wasn't. It's not something you can just quickly go and you can't copy it. You can't, if you're training incorrectly, you're not getting any skill at all. And this sort of mind power thing, and even like just the discipline, that's the self-discipline that's required in learning it, is really extraordinary.
Yeah, well, I was actually told to go to Susanna by a guy in Adelaide. I just went for a trip to visit my dad who was down there, and I met Albert and I met a few others, and wasn't them, but one of the instructors there sort of, he really liked me and he said, "You're really interested in the mind, aren't you?" And he sort of half whispers to me, I'd go to Susanna Ho if you can, you know, I'd go and try to learn from her." And I'd never really heard of her. So after a year at the academy, I went and managed to meet her, and then she'd said she'd allow me to start coming. And I've kept notes. I kept notes, which is something I don't know if you can see this. whole heap of red books up there, those red and black Chinese books. They've got thousands of pages of notes from 97 through. And I go through them regularly because I wrote a lot of things down then that I didn't understand. Whatever Susanna said, I used to just scribble it down. As soon as I'd get home or on a bit of paper, I'd just write it really fast. And then I'd get home and think, now, what exactly did she say? And there's so much wisdom in there. And I've got a few students here. I just teach for the love of it. And I'm teaching her what she taught me 20 years ago, and they're going, boom, they're getting, Chi Sao is improved heaps. And I, she always said to me, be soft and link your spine, but also don't fight the other person at all and just ride them, just relax and ride their arms, don't push, and, all those sort of basic stuff. But I think generally people don't do that. They generally are always trying to somehow, they feel like they got forward force, but they're just doing a bit of a push, and it never seems to click with them. Whereas Susanna always said, just don't try. And the first thing she said to me, this blew me out. I didn't know what she was going to teach me. She says to me, David, I want you to forget about fighting, and I want you to punch like a baby reaching for an apple.
Yeah, so that natural kind of movement.
Yeah, and she I realized that's one of the big keys to this mind force, this mind power, is to get that unconscious mind, subconscious mind into the equation. And that became a mantra for me, this whole baby reaching for an apple. I just meditated on that for years. What does this really mean? And, it's helped me a lot. And so many other.
I was just fossicking around because I had a whiteboard. I think I might have cleaned it off because I started teaching a private lesson student a few years ago, and I really only did that by accident, not by design. But when I was teaching him, I felt like I had to really deliver value for money. And also he himself had done Wing Chun for over 20 years.
Oh, really?
And he weighs 30 kilos more than I do. And so what that means is if I'm teaching him, I have to actually really be able to do something. There's no point in saying, blah, 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 and then he can overpower me. So it forced me to really consolidate what I had learned. And I also personally love structured things, and I love a structured way of teaching. So it forced me to summarise the really key points that I'd learned from Susanna Ho. And there's three skills that are really important in Wing Chun. The first one is structure, and the second one is coordination, and the third one is targeting. And so because you go along to lessons and like you've got lots of books up there with all your notes in it, but teaching this student forced me to really bring it together. And so each of those skills has a purpose, because it's all one thing to say what a skill is, but how do you apply it? What's the purpose of that skill? What does it enable you to do? So the purpose of structure is unification. And what that means is you want your whole body to work as one piece, as one unit. So it's all very well to go Taigong or raising up your spirit or whatever, but why? Why do you want to link? Because you want your body to work as one piece. And what that means is you can actually test it out, because then you've got the skill, you've got how you apply it, and the usage of the skill is really important. And it's by applying it, you find out what it is. So can you actually get your whole body to work as one piece? And then the second thing, coordination, is that your arms and your body, everything works together. And then within that application of that skill, there's a lot of kind of details of how you do that, different details that we've learned over the years under her, like, the wrists must always be directed to the centre line. And in the beginning, they've got to be on the centre, because you don't have the skill to have them off the centre, but direct to the centre. And we learned a lot about the back arm, and it reminded me of team sport, where the back arm is like your defence system, and it means that you don't let anything get through, basically. And then the third skill, which is targeting intention. And that again is can be applied in many, many different ways. Like, you know, we want the whole one piece targeting, but there's targeting intention in any one of our joints as well. And then when you do Chum Q, you give all the joints to the center, and that becomes like your control, and that controls all the joints targeting. So it's actually quite technical and quite complex when you come to analyze it at that level. So yeah, I got enormous benefit out of teaching that student, because I guess up until then, I really had the feeling that I couldn't actually do Wing Chun. So all those years in the Wing Chun Academy, okay, they were fantastic, but it was kind of physical. And I think at, you know, like really the zenith of my teaching or training, I did feel like, you know, I'm quite small, but I could spar with, I ran the private lesson at the Wing Chun Academy. Like Jim Fung used to run it, but he got me to take it over. And I remember a couple of really big guys in the private lesson. Like, I don't know if they were just cooperating with me, but I felt like I could actually handle that because they were doing it in a physical way too. And so like that was okay. But then when I realized there was this other way of doing Wing Chun that I'd completely sort of missed out on, I felt quite inadequate. I felt like my skill was pretty much zero. And when I went back and started learning under Susanna Ho, I just completely cleaned the slate. Like up until then, I was a so-called third level. I'd learnt the 3 empty hand forms. I'd learnt the complete wooden dummy. I had started the butterfly knife form and the pole preparation exercises. And when I went back to train under her in, I'd say it was 1997, I put it all down, and I have never to this day done the Bill G form. You know, like at 20 years, I've never done it again, because it would be wrong. It would be, so I'm not interested in wasting my time and repeating incorrect ways of doing things. So I went back to the Silam Tau form stage. I learned Silam Tau form from her. I learned single chi sao from her. I learned double chi sao from her. After some time, she asked me to go to the Chum Q stage, like you only when you're ready. And that took me a while, I can assure you. And yeah, so I just put aside everything that I'd completely ever learned and was prepared to start from the beginning, which was very good for my character in terms of humility.
Yeah.
But, what happened, Dave, is I wasn't interested in teaching, because most of the people like myself who trained there, we just felt kind of inadequate, especially compared with her. And she'd be showing all these amazing things, and we can't, no one can really do them very correctly. But she always told us, the same as Sigung told her, that you should teach, and you should teach to improve your own skill, basically. So it's a sort of a self-motivated reason. So I worked for a charity pro bono, went to Madagascar with my church in 2014, and I saw extreme poverty. And so there was a charity that we were involved in, and I worked pro bono for them, and made a decision to put them before my own business, like try and be of service finally at this late stage in my life. And a couple at church who knew that I did Wing Chun said to me, look, we want to learn Wing Chun. So I told them there's a lot of schools around, you know, in your area, go and look them up, go and visit them. And they said, no, we want to learn from you. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I don't teach, and there's plenty of places you can learn. And then they offered a certain sum of money. And I thought, oh, wow, I could give that money to Thrive Madagascar. Like, it would take me 1 hour a week, and the money that they pay me would make a big difference. Imagine how many breakfasts for poor children in the slums that could buy. And so I decided to start teaching them and give the money to that charity. And then when I told this friend of mine, because he used to drop by for a bit of training, and like I mentioned, he's quite a bit bigger than I am. And I tried to share a little bit with him that I'd learned from Susanna Ho. And I felt like he wasn't really paying attention. And so I didn't bother. When we trained together, I just privately made a decision. I'm going to wear you out, buddy. Like, I'm going to make your arms really tired because I know you're doing it incorrectly. And I'm not even going to bother telling you anymore about linking or anything like that because I feel you haven't been really taking it on board. And he'd have to stop rolling. I'd say, no, you're not allowed to stop. You've got to keep going. Come on, you've got to keep going. Anyway, when he heard that I was teaching, he said, I want to learn under you. And I thought, oh, okay, this is a bit of a different proposition. Like, you're going to be much harder to teach because you've done it for so much longer. Like, you already sort of roughly or think you know what you're doing. It's easier than teaching a beginner where, you can just start with something really simple. So I had to really pull out all stops. I thought, wow, I've got to be able to do it. I've got to, when I tell him about something like you're not linking, I need to be able to demonstrate physically so he can feel it. This is what not linking feels like, and this is what linking feels like.
Could you just give us a bit of an idea what linking is? Because I do understand, but I remember one of the guys, I don't remember Susanna saying that word linking. I remember she saying Tai Gong and sort of connect, from the top of your head to the rear of your spine. But I was just wondering if you could tell the viewers what you understand by linking.
Okay, look, it's really specific. It's if you touch the top of your head, it's the place that you'll naturally touch. It's where if the spine continued, it would be there. And Tai Gong is actually your anus touches your coccyx. So that's what you don't physically do it, because if you physically try to have any kind of contraction, any holding, that will prevent that connection. But what you do is you get your mind to tell your anus to touch your coccyx. So it's actually a very specific anatomical position. It's not just some general thing. Like, people do this generalized kind of thing, and it's could work a little bit, but it's not going to work much. So that's the two specific parts. And then what I remember one time that she taught us, like, she would often use metaphors because she was so frustrated with how slow we were at learning. And one of the metaphors that really resonated with me was Romeo and Juliet. I know this sounds weird, but that's what she used. She said it's like Romeo and Juliet, and you just imagine they're like as one. And so you use your mind to have these two very specific parts of the body, and then they're like as if they're one. Not as if they can touch each other. They can't physically. So this is where this mind power comes in. You use your mind. The mind is like the boss, and the body is like the workers. And the boss has to give the workers very, very specific instructions, and the boss needs to be kind to the workers, not mean and like, hey. The boss has to be very kind and explain and educate the workers in how to do it, and has to coach them. And if the body can't do it, it's to coach it and find another method. Like, maybe the way I've been explaining it hasn't been working. Could I explain it in another way? So if you get these two parts of the body and you think of them as one, then you have this linking. And it's not a physical thing, because you don't want any holding in the spine whatsoever. The spine's got to be, like, we know how the spine's got to be able to move, but that's what is the beginning of making your body one piece.
All right.
So that's one aspect of structure, but there's another really important aspect of structure. And I mean, to do that is really difficult. To have your anus touching your coccyx the whole time that you're moving and have the two of these parts linked together, I don't really know anyone much apart from her who can do that. And of course, some of the students in her school are better at it than others and better at it than me. But then there's this other thing called raising up your spirit. So what does that actually mean, and how do you do it? And again, it's very, very specific. So it starts from the top, but you actually bring it all the way up from the ground.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've found this Wing Chun to be a very different kind of undertaking. But yeah, teaching that student for me was fantastic, because after that, like, I taught him for a couple of years, I think. And after that, I felt like I could actually do something. I mean, not much, but whatever it was that I said, I could do it because I'd been forced. I had to, in order to be able to demonstrate on him.
Yeah, that's a great story. And, you know, you've shared some fantastic wisdom. I especially love that, you know, what you say about being unified. I've found I've had some really good teachers, but I've also been led down certain garden paths. This is just in my opinion, too much focusing on bits of the body. Do this with this bit and spin this and turn that, name that, and spin around here, and all sorts of thinking. But you know, the best teaching I got was from well, Seabuck Frederick. Do you know Frederick Moe?
No, look, I'm a real purist when it comes to Wing Chun. I respect everybody. I think there's room in the marketplace for everybody. I think every art and every branch of Wing Chun has something to contribute, and that's great. But I think each person makes a decision, what do I want to learn? And when I've seen Sigung and I've seen Susanna Ho, that's what I want. I want the thing that is the best.
That's
and
it. That's why I was
my way of thinking, yeah, is a purist way of thinking, and that is you can't mix all those. You don't want chop suey. Like that was one of Susanna's favourite things.
I think it's crazy.
I don't want. I want this particular thing, this skill.
Yeah.
Like, are your arms and feet working together as one unit? Then the purpose of linking, of unification, is so that all the joints can move freely. So it's not just for its own sake. It's not just, oh, my body moves as one. Why? Now every single joint can fully rotate the way that it's anatomically designed to do.
Yeah, just letting it naturally happen, which is, you know, the baby reaching for an apple mantra taught me so much, because it really says, how does a baby move? A baby doesn't think anything. The baby just reaches and grabs the apple. The baby wants the apple, the baby gets the apple, which is really that intent you were talking about. It's pure. It's just, there's no sense of self with a baby. It just wants the apple. It takes the apple, it brings the apple back. And yeah, the man I was talking about, Frederick Moe, he started with Sigung in 1955. So he's in New Zealand, but he's a wonderful man, and I've only met him a couple of times, but you often see him in the videos, and he would have known Susanna very well, because he was there in Hong Kong. I don't know when he moved out here, but when I first met him, he told me a lot of things that were different to the way I'd been taught, but it made everything make sense, the same as Susanna. And I, you know, as I said, I regretted leaving Sydney only because I wanted to continue with her and see how far I could go with her. But I've managed to put it together to some level with what I've got. And it's essentially what you're saying. All those things you say, I totally agree. And yeah, it's been wonderful hearing all this. So we've got 5 minutes. Is it 6 o'clock you said would be okay?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks so much for telling us all that. That was great. And
you know, Dave, what I can do is I might upload a couple of videos to Dropbox if you'd like to put them on your channel, because I'm thinking of that weapons one that we made recently that we teach in safety strategies, just a little grab of some of the weapons, and the short range power one, just because some of the TV segments, you know, they're a little bit long. You don't necessarily want to wade through 7 minutes of an interview to get to the action part. And I'm just thinking of another project that I became really keen on, And it was after the Yip Man movies came out. So one of my friends from the Wing Chun Academy is a filmmaker, and he and I often discussed doing projects together. And we talked about how the Yip Man films were great, but they're just made up. They're nothing about actually Yip Man really who he was or anything like that.
So true.
And we talked about like to me, the real Wing Chun people are very, very interesting. You know, Sigung is very interesting. He was still alive at the time we were discussing it. And so we were going to do a documentary about Wing Chun in Australia, because Australia's really lucky. Like, we got really top people coming here. And if you think about Wing Chun coming out of China, Yip Man coming to Hong Kong, and through him Wing Chun being spread, and you know, it's not really spread big. So Sigung, the other Leung Seung, like you know, would have had a few students, but not many people went out teaching professionally. So Jim Fung would have been one of the few people like running it as a business. But Australia got, like Derek, we've still got 3 people alive here in Australia who actually trained in Yip Man school. Like, that is amazing. Derek Form in Sydney, William Chung, I think he's still alive in Melbourne, and Greg Choi in Brisbane. Like, how amazing that there's still 3 people, like they personally knew Bruce Lee, and William Chung was Bruce Lee's senior. And so my friend and I, we discussed this idea that, like, for the archives of Wing Chun, what if it, you know, time passes on and Sigung's dead now? Like, how sad we didn't get to interview him. But I mean, of course, there's a lot of footage of him. But just to put something down for the history of the art, like a, you know, a documentary that says this is really who was who and what happened and where they've gone now.
Please
that
do
particular to focus on Australia. Yeah, well, we called it, what did we call it? Chinese Blood, Australian Heart, or something like that. So I've got a little trailer that we made for that. I'll ask him if I can send that to you. It's even got a little bit of Susanna Ho in it.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I've got about, I don't know, 750 people who follow me, and they're all really nice people and super keen, and I don't get any trolls. It's sort of sweet. I had one troll early on, and he just gave up because I was always nice to him and would sort of just make jokes, but everyone else,
that's so lovely.
they're just real grown-ups who write really interesting things and ask me questions, and we're sort of, I'm just the head of the gang of people who are keen on finding out the real Wing Chun, you know, and talking to wonderful people like yourself who can give us ideas and clues and a bit of inspiration.
Well, you know, one of the events that I really did enjoy was the Chu Shong Tin anniversary. You know how their group runs it like annually. It used to be anyway.
The 83rd one?
I didn't go to the one in Adelaide, but I did. Some of my training friends.
Sydney?
I went to the one in Sydney a couple of years previous to that. Yeah.
Susanna was there, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Because I think
she was.
I think you and I sort of saw each other and went hi, and Susanna, my friend Stephen Lung, was talking to Susanna, and then I was standing there, and I didn't think she was snobbing me, but I thought, you know, I'm nobody special. She probably doesn't even remember me. And then she goes, "Oh, Dave," and she actually grabbed me and gave me a hug, and yeah, that was something.
Yeah, it is very nice to be part of that whole.
I so stoked she remembered me. You know, it was just sort of seemed to have a bit of affection for me, because I certainly have great affection for her. Nice.
Well, Dave, I'm going to finish up in a moment. Is there anything else, any final questions or things you'd like to discuss?
No, I just could you just quickly tell us about your business, and if people want to know about it, if they have, you know, if they work for a corporation or some other business that might be able to engage you.
Sure. Oh, look, I feel really fortunate. Honestly, I feel like the luckiest person in the whole world. That career as a professional martial art instructor was amazing. I loved it. And, you know, that 10 years with the Wing Chun Academy was just fantastic. And not many people have that profession. Like a lot of people have it as a hobby or a part-time thing. But, you know, I just feel so fortunate that, you know, God chose me for that profession. And honestly, Dave, I still believe I've got a lot more to do. Like I really want to do a lot more. And so then to be able to make that transition from the martial art industry to the workplace training industry, and I love my work. We teach frontline workers in transport and local government, all kinds of, you know, where they're dealing with the public, and if some few members of the public are a bit aggressive, like I really, really enjoy that. And the really best part of our work is from Wing Chun. It's that, you know, some of those really simple principles and movements from Wing Chun that can be so quickly learnt and adapted and applied.
Yeah.
Luckily, our business, we work on word of mouth. We're busy. We, you know, pretty much fully booked all the time. And I have a great guy that works with me from Wing Chun, and yeah, I really enjoy that work very much. And what I enjoy is having a high quality training service that really works. And for me, the most exciting part of my work is the people who've used it, like a bus driver that did a 4-hour workshop and a passenger tried to smash him over the head with a beer bottle, and he puts up his hand and, you know, he said, I was aiming for the nose, but I missed. I got him on the forehead instead, and he was straight off the bus. So I find these stories of how people have used it really satisfying, really exciting. But what I'm personally interested in, I mean, I want to go help people who really need help. And what I'm hoping to do, I saw a film a few years ago run by a charity called Compassion, who support poor children all around the world and feed and clothe them and give them a bit of education. And so I saw that they are involved in all kinds of different operations. And one of them is, you know, we know that child trafficking, 5.5 million children go missing every year. Like, where do they go? You tell me where they go. They go into slavery, and they're sold and they're, you know, exploited. And so this film was about some people who are rescuing children from a brothel. And the guy running the operation had come from this ex-CIA background. And when I looked at him, I thought, wow, like God's using every skill that guy's been given and putting it to this incredibly meaningful usage at that stage in his life. And when I saw that, that's what I really hoped for. I thought, what if God could use me for some purpose, like my skill and my knowledge? And what if I could train people, you know, just add some small part to help them with some personal safety skills where they're doing something really meaningful.
Yep.
And so I've actually reached out to some organisations who send cross-cultural workers out into overseas countries to offer free training to those people. And yeah, I'm just waiting to see what the future holds. But I really feel like all of everything I've done up until now is a preparation for something more and something more meaningful that I might be able to do.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really great vision. And so we'll leave it at that. That was terrific. Thanks so much, Karen.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, let me know when you're coming down to Sydney so we can catch up for a bit of cheese out.
Yes. Oh, that would be magic. I'd love it.
That would be fantastic. I'll have to really brush up. Hey, thanks so much. I better move on, but thank you. I've really enjoyed it. And send me a link when it's posted so I can have a look.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.